Hello, my friends, and welcome to 10 incredible games that you might not have heard of. This is a video I've wanted to do for a really long time, and with the Steam Winter Sale going on right now, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to do it. Fundamentally, this channel is about sharing things that I love with you guys, and these are games that I absolutely love. They range from deeply interesting to absolutely incredible. And so these are games that I really think deserve more attention than they're getting, and I wanted to showcase them, especially because right now they're on deep discount. If I've calculated this correctly, this video will be going up Christmas Eve, which is also the day before Hanukkah this year, so if you celebrate either of those holidays and are looking for last-minute shopping, then this should hopefully give you some good ideas, and these games are all very much worth checking out. And are on excellent sales, so they should bring you awesome value. This is not a top sales video or anything like that, or best deals. This is just games that I felt like talking about. Obviously, there are hundreds of incredible games I could have included. These are just 10 games that I wanted to recommend. I should mention also, I'm not sponsored in any way for these recommendations, although if you are one of the developers of these games, then hit me up. These are just games that I love and wanted to share with you because I happen to like them. I'm going to start with a game that I have talked about a few times on this channel before, Solasta, Crown of the Magister, which is on for 70% off. If you like Baldur's Gate, I would definitely recommend checking this one out. Solasta is an RPG based on Dungeons & Dragons, based on the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rule set, just like Baldur's Gate 3. It came out around the same time, so Baldur's Gate got, rightly, a lot of the attention that could have gone to Solasta, I think. Because this game is a lower budget and more indie game, but still based on the incredibly satisfying rule set of Dungeons & Dragons. I guess I'll play the trailer here. Hopefully this won't cause a copyright claim on the video, but I suppose we'll see as we go. Solasta uses the same basic rules as Baldur's Gate 3, the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rule set, which is based on the tabletop game, but is a much more faithful interpretation of the rules than Baldur's Gate is. Baldur's Gate takes a lot of liberties with how the rules are interpreted, and Solasta takes many fewer, so if you have played the tabletop game, it'll be more familiar to you. What this means in general is that it is a more tactical and more difficult experience in a lot of ways. So if you really enjoy the strategy and combat of Baldur's Gate, I highly recommend Solasta. What it doesn't have, as you can sort of see from the trailer, is the incredible graphics. It's got a serviceable story, but it's not, the writing and stuff is not on the level of Baldur's Gate because it is a lower budget game. But the tactical combat is, in my opinion, in a lot of ways better. Solasta has incredible verticality in its combat arenas. Characters can cling to walls, climb up pillars, drop blocks down on enemies, fly, cling to the ceiling, actually fly, as in be up in the air, which you can't do in Baldur's Gate. It also cares a lot about lighting, which is something that Baldur's Gate has whole systems for, but then mostly ignores. So Solasta, you actually have to really care if your characters have dark vision, carry torches, and so on. Enemies will use darkness against you, and if you aren't prepared for that, it can be really, really dangerous. So, obviously, these are both incredible games, and Baldur's Gate is rightly the sort of game of the decade for a lot of people. But Solasta, I think, has a lot to offer if you enjoy the combat. Another thing that we're seeing here in this trailer is that Solasta has a fully featured dungeon maker as one of its features. So users can create dungeons, encounters, and entire campaigns. So there are hundreds and thousands of user-created campaigns available for Solasta, so you will just never run out of things to do and content. And some of them are, in my opinion, even better written and more fully featured than the main campaign of the game. There is a lot of DLC that adds more content, and that's also on sale. I think it's worth it, the DLC, personally, but it's certainly not needed to enjoy the game. The other thing about this game is you create all 4 of your characters, so you can really build a party that synergizes with one another. The dialogue is chosen semi-procedurally, so your characters will kind of develop personalities on their own as they go through. Like I said, the story is serviceable. I would say it is reasonably well written and fun, but don't expect the sort of depth and complexity of BG3. But really, you're here for the combat and gameplay of Solasta, which I think is genuinely incredible. Let's look at the screenshots as well. Another thing about Solasta that differentiates it from Baldur's Gate is that it is played on a grid, just like the tabletop game, which means that distances are actually exact, so no more sort of pixel hunting to find whether you can make a throw or not. You can just do that, and no more trying to place your fireballs on the exact edge of an enemy, because it'll just cover the number of squares that it covers. And so you'll know exactly what's happening. Makes sort of readability a little better when you're in combat. The character creation, as you can see, is not as in-depth, but still really fun. And one of the great things here, of course, as you can see, this game is played in extremely vertical spaces, includes flying enemies who are super dangerous, so you're going to need to be able to deal with that. And basically the tactical combat of this game, I think, is excellent. It's extremely difficult, so if you're looking for a tactical challenge, using the 5th edition rule set, Solasta's definitely got you. It's funny there's only 5 screenshots here. I feel like they could use a few more screenshots on this Steam page. Solasta devs, if you are listening, you can have that advice for free. A few more screenshots would definitely help sell the game, something that I'm trying to do for you. This game is, in my opinion, not like groundbreaking in a lot of ways. It's not going to absolutely blow your mind, but for a strategic and tactical experience, and if you love Dungeons and Dragons and are looking to experience that tabletop combat in a video game, no game does it better. So, Solasta, highly recommend. Wildermyth. So for several years now, I have said occasionally that this is my game of the decade. Wildermyth is an incredible game, a deep tactical RPG layered over a beautiful and poetic setting with an incredibly unique visual style and presentation. Let me bring up the trailer here so we can actually see this. The way that this game works is that you create these characters and they live through vignettes that happen over the course of the game as you play through it. It's told in a series of stories, of like pop-up stories and comics. And those vignettes radically change how the characters work in the game and how they actually function tactically, how they interact with one another, and the stories that develop. The stories can then be carried over from campaign to campaign. You can get characters that develop these long-standing personalities that will be with you for game after game after game and campaign after campaign. There's almost a dozen campaigns, I think, each of which has incredibly intricate and fascinating writing. I love the writing in this game. I think it's the real draw, as well as the visual style, which, as you can see from the trailer, is incredibly interesting and unique, and also creates these really beautiful set pieces, especially when the battlefields get quite complex with fire and stuff. The whole screen will light up because the preponderance of fire on your screen is going to make things really interesting. The characters can be altered by the story events, and their bodies can change and shift because this is an extremely magical world. So you can have a character with the head of a raven or the arm of a fire elemental, and that changes how they affect the game. This game also has an extremely unique and fascinating magic system. The way magic works in Wildermyth is your spellcasters bond with objects on the field and then can manipulate those objects to do things. So a spellcaster could bond with a tree and have it grow vines that entangle enemies, or fire a splinter of wood from its trunk, or bond with like an alchemical table to fire clouds of scalding steam, or make the floor slippery, or something like that. There's a lot of really deep and interesting possibilities with the magic system that this game explores really well. In the expansions, there's also a roguelike mode, the Omen Road. So not only does this have a whole bunch of story-based campaigns, it also has a roguelike if you want to buy the expansion. It's only on for 35% off, which isn't that deep a discount, but it is also in a bundle with another game that I'm going to talk about later in the Deep and Replayable RPGs bundle, so you could get both of them for 50% off if you like the pitches for these games that I'm putting in. Honestly, there's it's hard to describe what is just so cool about this game. You really have to experience it for yourself, because every moment that you're playing Wildermyth is sort of like playing through a poem, but a poem that really also scratches the tactical itch and makes you think strategically the entire way through. This is just a beautiful game in like all senses of the word. Next up, Griftlands. Griftlands is a deck building game, sort of in the style of Slay the Spire, but much more open-ended than Slay the Spire. Where you go and what you do isn't based on sort of like the next node in a progression, but actually is much more of an open world decision-making tree where you have to decide what to do on each day as you sort of experience the adventures. There's multiple different characters, and Griftlands is incredibly story-based, so unlike most deck building games, this one actually has a really deep and complex story with fascinating world building that you really get to experience, and also a lot of visual style. You meet really interesting characters as you go through the game, so unlike the very, very minimalist version of a deck building game that you get with something like Slay the Spire or Monster Train or others in the genre, Griftlands is a much more maximalist experience. You have unique decks for combat and negotiation. So you will have both a deck for negotiation when you're talking to other characters and a deck for combat if you get into combat. And because it is an RPG, you can choose to resolve a lot of situations with one or the other. This game has some of the most interesting sort of engine deck building of any of these deck builders. You can get these decks that go infinite and loop card after card after card. You can get decks that allow you to build up huge amounts of power and hit the enemies for a really powerful blow in a single strike. You can get decks that do all kinds of really interesting and unique mechanics. What makes this game so cool is the visual style, the fact that it's an open-ended RPG that's also a deck-building game, and the fact that it's got like a bunch of different characters that all play out really differently, and you can sort of learn the stories and side with different characters as you go. You can play through challenge modes, it's got daily challenge modes, and it's also just got a really cool and fun theme. I think this is one of the best deck building games out there, and I'm generally surprised that it's not talked about more, because both the deck building and the actual gameplay are really good. It's by Clay Interactive, who also did Don't Starve, and games like that. It's on for 60% off, which is a pretty good deal. I will say that the price point for this game is a little bit high for a deck building game because it's an open-ended RPG. And I think that's part of why this didn't get as much attention as some other games, because people kind of expect this genre to be like a $3 game. But because this is a whole RPG attached to a really complicated deck builder, then it costs a little more. So this sale is a great opportunity to pick it up. And I think that you will have a really fun time with this because it's a really fascinating game. Next up, a game that would have to be on my shortlist for my absolute favorite games of all time, Tales of Maj'Eyal, or TOME. You can actually find videos of me playing this on this channel, so if you want to dig back through the archives and find some gameplay footage for me playing this game, you can do that. I've probably put more than 1,000 hours into this roguelike RPG over the years since I first started playing it. This is, in my opinion, the best roguelike ever made, with incredible complexity and interesting character building. There's more than 50 different classes, I think, over the expansions, and each of them play out radically differently with completely different skill trees. Let me see if I can find a screenshot here of the character building. Yeah, here we go. So each of these skill trees has completely different and interesting skills. Each of these little icons is its whole own skill, and the combinations of those skills make your character play out in incredibly interesting ways. Enemies have all of the skills that players have access to as well, and some enemy combinations of skills can become incredibly complicated and interesting to fight. The game has multiple difficulty settings. The Madness difficulty setting is so hard that I think only like 3 people in the entire world, myself not included amongst them, have a confirmed victory on Madness difficulty. Tales of Maj'Eyal is a extremely deep and complex game that you can basically put a lifetime of play into and still be finding new stuff. This game's on sale for 50% off right now, which makes it like $3 American. Obviously, incredible value for the 1,000 hours or so that I've put into this game. But it's also worth noting that this game is entirely free. Buying the Steam version just gets you, I think, cloud saves is the feature it gets you mostly, and you can support the developer. And of course, you can pay for the expansions, but the game is at base completely free. If you go to the Tales of Maj'Eyal website, then you can just try the game and see if you like it, and then buy it if you like it. Though for $3, it's really hard not to get your value out of this game. The depths of strategy and complexity available to it are really fun. The thing that differentiates it from other roguelikes is a lot of the things that I really like about it are how much respect it has for the player's time. Every turn you take is interesting, and you will very rarely just be sitting there auto-attacking over and over again. You also are not going to be stockpiling consumables for the perfect moment, because there's actually no consumables in the game. The way that the consumables work are you get items that you can choose a few of to have available on a cooldown in order to have like the game's equivalent of a healing potion and stuff like that. So it really respects the player's time and gives you interesting strategic decisions at every moment. You can see from the gameplay here that there are like dozens of buttons that you can push at any given time, and the person who's playing the game is doing that. And you will see if you watch my gameplay videos of that you'll get even more buttons than that. And the sheer number of interesting classes and interesting scenarios that the game can generate are second to absolutely none. This is just one of my absolute favorite games, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Next up, a game that really fulfills the promise of games as vehicles for incredible storytelling. I Was a Teenage Exocolonist. This game is honestly quite difficult to describe and doesn't really neatly fit a genre label, which makes it, I think, somewhat difficult for marketing on Steam. It was kind of labeled as a life sim, you can see here, sort of like Stardew Valley, or as a dating sim. And while there is romance present in the game, I wouldn't say it's either of those things. I Was a Teenage Exocolonist is a game about how people interact with society and politics, and how children process these things as they get older, and how we as a people can shape the society that we live in. It's a game about trauma and love and all of the deep emotions that make things human, and it's one of the most human games that I've ever played. It's beautiful, both visually, and the writing is deep and complex and really interesting, and it deals with much darker themes than you might imagine from the pastel art style, which I think makes things even more interesting when you actually start getting deeper into the game. This game, like I said, it's very difficult to describe. There is a deck building game also in the game, so you can see this in the trailer here, and it's a pretty good deck building game. I wouldn't say it's like the most complex or difficult deck building game I've ever played, but if you and you can set the game to auto win encounters for you if you are just there for the story, or set it for a more difficult experience if you want to play strategically while also experiencing the storyline of the game. And either way, I think you will have a great time. This game is also very open-ended. It has, I think, 30 or 40 different endings that you can reach, depending on the choices that you make during the game. So it's incredibly choice-based and incredibly story-based, and follows the life of a kid growing up, coming into their adulthood, and how they interact with the society that they find themselves in, and how they change that society. It's a game that has just deep emotions and beautiful storytelling all the way through. And honestly, I just can't say enough nice things about this game. I'm struggling to find good words to describe it, and really you should just play it for yourself, because it really does something that I think pretty much no other game does. I can't think of any other game that does things like this one, and this game really left a lasting impression on me. From a deeply story-based game to a pure strategy game, Offworld Trading Company. Offworld Trading Company is an older game, but it really holds up in my opinion. It does a type of strategy that more or less no other game has done, and I think got a lot of attention sort of when it came out, but then kind of fell out of the public eye because it doesn't fall neatly into categories. This is a game where it plays out kind of like an RTS, so you play in real time, but instead of building units to attack and defeat enemies, you are trying to corner the market on goods in order to buy out the competition. Offworld Trading Company is a game about fast pivots between different strategies and about outthinking and outsmarting your opponent. The game starts by selecting what company you're going to play based on the map that you see. And so right away you can see it's sort of different in that sense than how an RTS would play out. Like in an RTS, you would probably pick your race or faction or whatever you were using before you load into the game. And then you would have a strategy based on that. In Offworld, you react to what's going on in the game down to picking the very faction that you're playing. And from there, you will pivot out of production of one resource completely because it has become overproduced and into production of other resources, and doing so at good times and interacting with your opponents to stop them from doing so is the meat of the strategy game. It really is a game that requires strategy in ways that no other game does. The single player and the AI is quite good, which is good because, full disclosure, nobody plays this game anymore. You probably will not find an online game unless you really go looking for one. You probably have to go to the Discord or whatever community is available in order to find opponents to play this game against actual people or play with your friends. But I have just had a great time playing this game solo and just enjoying the AI. There's AI campaigns for each of the companies as well that you can play through. So there are hundreds of hours of single player content in this game. And it really is, I mean, for $3, it's on a 90% sale. This will just give you a game that makes you think in a way no other game makes you think. And I think that that is just a very cool thing for a game to do. This next game is probably pretty polarizing. In fact, I think you can see from the mostly positive reviews that a lot of people have strong opinions about this game. I would suspect that this is a lot of people who were like, this game is a 95 out of 100, and people who were like, this game is a 5 out of 100. If you are a sicko like me who likes losing at games, Nowhere Profit is a game that will give you that in spades. This is a deck building game that is very much in the genre and style of Slay the Spire. So you build a deck and make your way through nodes as you play. But the gameplay actually plays out on a tactical grid. So you will place your units on a grid as you go. It has a very cool visual style, as you can see from the trailer here. And as you play the game, a couple interesting innovations in the strategy. Each unit that you have represents a person who's in your caravan as you're trying to sort of make your way through this post-apocalyptic landscape. And if one of your cards dies, it dies out of your deck. So you have to be very, very careful with losing cards and how you are playing your cards throughout the game. Because if your characters, I guess, if they die once, they get wounded and become weaker. And if they die a second time while wounded, that card is gone forever. So resource management and playing the fights very carefully becomes a really interesting strategic puzzle when you're playing Nowhere Profit. And I really think that this game deserved more attention than it got because it's a fascinating take on the genre. I will say, don't play this game if you can't handle frustration. I think I've only played it on the hardest difficulty, but I think I've only won this game like 3 times out of 100 runs. And, if I do say so myself, I am very good at this genre of game. So you really need to put in the effort in order to get good at this game. Because it really makes you think in a different way than other deck building games do. And I love that. And I think that it is really cool, with just sort of how it makes you manage your resources and how it makes you think about the game. This game is difficult and, interesting all the way through. The world building is also very understated, but pretty well done. The story in this game, I would say, is much better than it has to be. It is presented in sort of these vignettes as you go through the nodes in the map as you play through the game. But the story actually is pretty cool and pretty interesting. It's kind of this post-apocalyptic society with tech worship of old tech, reminiscent, I guess, of Warhammer 40k, but in a more sort of like desert or frontier setting. And the way that the story is told, I think, fits the very understated and very difficult nature of the game, in that it is a game where the story unfolds much as the strategy unfolds as you play through, and requires attention from the player. If you like putting in effort into your games, if you like putting in the work and getting rewards out of the games, then I think Nowhere Prophet is going to be really interesting. But I will say, if you are looking for a game to although this is a card game, this is not a like casually relaxing card game, because it is very hard. So you do have to be prepared for that if you want to play Nowhere Prophet. Next up, a much more story-based game, Citizen Sleeper. Citizen Sleeper is described as role-playing in the ruins of interplanetary capitalism, and I think that gives you a great idea of what this game is going to be about. This is a deeply story-oriented game. It is moody and deep and existential, and designed to make you think and feel things about your place in the world, your place in society, and what the world that we are building for the future looks like. This is a game about a cyberpunk future dystopia, a corporate-controlled universe in which everything, down to your very body, is controlled by corporations, and what that means for people living in the world, and what that means for you, and how you can still relate to other humans in that circumstance. This is a beautifully told and beautifully presented game. I love the artwork, I love the writing, I think that the music is incredible, and it all works together to build this very powerful narrative. This is, as you can imagine from what I've been saying, a very political game. So if you are not interested in a game with an overt message, then this game is probably not for you. Although you should probably interrogate that as well, because all art has a message, and if you aren't interested in art with an overt message, it means that you're only experiencing art where the authors want to hide the message from you. But just something to think about. But this game is definitely has a message, and whether or not you agree with the politics of the game, whether or not you agree with the message, I think that it is a very interesting message to consider. So very much something to think about that will get your brain working. I think this is another game that really fulfills the brief of games as storytelling. There is a mechanic to the game, and you can lose the game if you roll bad dice or plan extremely badly, but mostly this is a game about playing through the stories and figuring out how you want to impact the world and what ending you are aiming for, and then going for it. And it's a game about sort of existentialism and dread, and the hope that you can build up in the face even of overwhelming and despair-inducing societal problems, which is of course something that is quite relevant, I think, in the modern world, as things are very hard for a lot of people and we need messages of hope. This game is great at delivering one. Next up, Vagrus, the Riven Realms. Vagrus is a trading-focused RPG. You manage a trading caravan, which is called a comitatus in this game, in a sort of Roman-inflected post-apocalyptic desert world. I guess this is kind of the post-apocalyptic set of games, huh? I've mentioned a lot of post-apocalypse games. But Vagrus is an extremely interesting and complicated and unforgiving survival simulator in which you have to manage your trading caravan and fight off enemies in a tactical combat as well as in caravan-to-caravan combat. I will say that this is an old-school RPG, and it is very heavily based in sort of pen and paper and tabletop role-playing, so if you don't like reading, this is not the game for you. There is a lot of text in this game, and you have to read in order to be able to enjoy this game. So if that is not your style of gaming, then definitely don't try this one out. But if you really like complex and interesting world building, detailed management of trading and survival mechanics, and a pretty solid and interesting tactical combat game alongside that, as well as deep storylines, relationships between factions, and all kinds of interactions with the world, then Vagrus is a fascinating and very well done game. This is a complex game and an unforgiving game, so you do have to be ready to kind of meet it halfway. If that does not sound appealing to you, then I will say this is another one that's going to be pretty polarizing in general. But if that does sound appealing to you, then this game is absolutely incredible in my opinion. I've never found a game that really manages to create the feeling of running a trading caravan like this, the way that Vagrus does, where you really have to think about what you are purchasing and what you're trading and how much of it you're carrying and what you are doing in terms of, you know, how you're paying your workers in order to maintain their morale and everything. So Vagrus is a really interesting game where you really manage a trading caravan in a way that I think no other game has done, and I think that that is a pretty big gap in the strategy game space, and it does so alongside a really rich and detailed and complex world with different factions and lots of long-term and detailed quests that give this game a ton of depth. This is a game that's absolutely incredible if you're looking to spend some time and really sink your teeth into something, but because it's all turn-based and mostly text-based, you don't have to do that all at once, and you don't have to sort of sit down specially to do it. It runs on Steam Deck very well, and it's got like remote play on phone and tablet on TV. I personally played this game mostly while lying in bed or while watching TV, and I would, do one quest in this game and read the description and then swap back and forth. So this is a great game to play if you are looking for something really deep to keep your attention, but also that lets you, I don't know, watch your favorite YouTube videos while you are also playing a game. So Vagrus, I think, is great both because of the depth of world building and story building and the management aspects of the game and the strategy that it brings to the table, but also because despite being a huge and deep and complex game, it's very easy to play in somewhat bite-sized chunks. So it might seem at first like a game that you might just require too much of the player, but honestly, I think that it is a great game. Admittedly, I will say not for everyone, because you really have to love reading and world building to get the most out of this game, but I do love those things, and so I really enjoyed this one. And finally, Troubleshooter: Abandoned Children. This is a game that's in the style of XCOM. So if you've played the new XCOM games, XCOM or XCOM 2, then Troubleshooter's gameplay will be very familiar to you. But it is XCOM set in a world where everyone has incredible magical powers, and it's sort of XCOM taken up to 1,000,000. Enemy HPs are in the stratosphere. The amount of damage that you do is ridiculous. Your characters get dozens or hundreds of abilities over the course of the game. And you can end up with these characters that can do 30, 40 actions in a given turn if you have these incredible combinations. It's a Korean game, and it is told with a very long and detailed and interesting story that does suffer occasionally from some translation issues. But I found the story pretty good overall. I will say that the art style isn't my personal favorite. For a sort of tactical game, the anime style isn't what I prefer. But it's serviceable enough. You can tell what's going on and everything. And the gameplay itself is so good that I just don't find that to be a real impediment. Because the things that can happen in this game and the tactical puzzles that you can solve are so fascinating. And if you just wanted to do XCOM, but everything is turned up to just 1 billion, then Troubleshooter is exactly that, where all of the enemies and all of your allies are so powerful, you're always just chucking rockets at each other. If you've played Baldur's Gate 3, which if you're on this part of this video on this channel, it is a fair bet that you have, you've probably heard me say pretty frequently that Baldur's Gate or Dungeons & Dragons is rocket tag, where people just are chucking the most powerful blows possible at one another. Troubleshooter is like that, but even more so. You and the enemies are so strong that you have to really navigate how to approach these tactical puzzles when every single attack is just absolutely devastating and can turn the entire battlefield to ash in a single blow. I guess in that sense, it is very much like a sort of Dragon Ball Z style anime where everything is just as world-shakingly powerful as possible. But in a tactical RPG and a tactical war game sense. This game also has some of the best development support of like any game I've ever played. They were continuously adding content for years after release. Entire new missions, new characters, new enemies, new abilities and implementations and weapons, and have continued to provide incredible support for the game. This is just one of the most well-supported and most detailed and most well-developed games that I've ever played, and continuously gets new updates and support even now 4 years after launch. Another thing that's really cool about this game is that like many of the enemies in the game you can capture and use yourself in order to use the power of those enemies. And some unique abilities you can only acquire by doing that. So you can really build your team to these incredible heights. The building of characters in this game is incredibly complex and interesting, and then yields awesome combos in sort of the tactical wargaming sense as you play through the game. This is a game, if you are a strategy freak like me and just really like deep strategy games, then Troubleshooter will absolutely scratch that itch. All right, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed these kind of 5-minute elevator pitches for 10 games that I really like. Presented in no particular order, and hopefully you found something here that you are interested in trying, and I hope that you enjoy it if you do. If you do end up playing and enjoying any of these games, either one that you had dismissed at first or one that you had never heard of, definitely let me know. Like I said at the beginning, this channel is fundamentally about me sharing things that I like with you guys, so if I've been successful in that, I'd love to hear about it. Also, if you have any recommendations for games you think I would enjoy or other people watching this video might enjoy, go ahead and drop those below as well. I'm always interested in hearing more, learning about more games. I love games and I love learning about games I haven't seen before. So if you have a personal favorite that you think people should give a shot to, definitely let me know in the comments below as well. Also, let me know if you liked this style of video. Obviously, this is a bit of an experiment for the channel. I've not done something like this before, so if you like this kind of just like 5-minute elevator pitches for various games, I have hundreds of more game recommendations I can give out, of course. So let me know if you enjoyed the video, or if you didn't enjoy the video, let me know that as well. It's all valuable feedback. As always, of course, you can subscribe, you can survive to this channel for more video game analysis. And thank you for watching, my friends. I'll catch you next time.